What if the crown's deepest secret wasn't buried in history, but whispered in a royal dining hall? Princess Anne has finally broken her silence, and King Charles can't ignore it any longer. In a stunning confrontation, Anne exposed the truth about Queen Elizabeth's final wish, and it wasn't what Camilla wanted to hear. A single sentence shattered decades of silence and triggered a royal reckoning. Was Camilla ever meant to be queen? Why is Anne risking everything now? And how long can Charles balance love against legacy? The time for silence is over. The truth is here, and it changes everything. The banquet bombshell. In the grand halls of Buckingham Palace, a royal banquet was underway, filled with dignitaries and the elite. Amidst the clinking of glasses and polite conversation, Princess Anne stood, commanding attention. With a composed yet firm voice, she addressed Camilla not as queen, but pointedly as queen consort. The distinction was deliberate, echoing the late Queen Elizabeth II's wishes. Her Majesty made it clear, "You are queen consort." That's what the people were promised, Anne stated, her words slicing through the room's decorum. The atmosphere turned tense, with Camilla visibly taken aback and the assembled guests stunned into silence. This wasn't merely a social faux pas, it was a public assertion of royal protocol and a challenge to Camilla's assumed title. Anne's declaration signaled a brewing conflict within the royal family, bringing private disagreements into the public eye. The incident underscored Anne's commitment to upholding her mother's legacy and the traditional structures of the monarchy. It was a moment that would reverberate through the royal corridors, setting the stage for further revelations. Anne's public correction was more than a momentary lapse in etiquette. It was rooted in a solemn promise made during Queen Elizabeth's final days. Queen Elizabeth's final wish. In the quiet moments before Queen Elizabeth II's passing, she shared her heartfelt wishes with Princess Anne. Among them was a clear directive. Camilla should be acknowledged as queen consort, not queen. This distinction was significant, reflecting the Queen's intent to honor tradition and the memory of Princess Diana. Anne, ever the dutiful daughter, took this to heart. She pledged to uphold her mother's wishes, understanding the weight such titles carry within the monarchy. This promise became a guiding principle for Anne, influencing her interactions and decisions within the royal family. The Queen's preference was not merely about titles, but about preserving the integrity of the monarchy. By specifying queen consort, she aimed to maintain a balance between acknowledging Camilla's role and respecting the public's sentiments. Anne's commitment to this promise highlights her deep respect for her mother's legacy and her unwavering dedication to the monarchy's traditions. It also sheds light on the underlying tensions that would later surface within the royal household. While Anne's actions were driven by duty and loyalty, personal history added another layer to the unfolding drama, rooted in past relationships and perceived betrayals. The love triangle that never healed. Long before Camilla became a prominent figure in the royal narrative, she and Anne shared a connection through Andrew Parker Bowles. Anne and Andrew had a close relationship, one that many believed could have led to marriage. However, due to Andrew's Catholic faith and the Church of England's restrictions at the time, their union was deemed unsuitable. Camilla's subsequent marriage to Andrew was a personal blow to Anne. It wasn't just about losing a romantic partner. It felt like a betrayal by someone she considered a friend. This sense of betrayal deepened years later when Camilla married Charles, Anne's brother. For Anne, these events weren't isolated incidents, but but part of a pattern where Camilla seemed to overstep boundaries, both personal and royal. The intertwining of personal relationships and royal duties created a complex web of emotions and tensions. This history adds depth to Anne's public stance against Camilla's title. It's not solely about upholding tradition, but also about confronting unresolved personal grievances that have lingered for decades. As personal histories and royal duties collide, the stage is set for further confrontations and revelations within the royal family, challenging long-held traditions and relationships. Anne's cold resistance over the years. Long before the banquet confrontation, Princess Anne had made her position clear, not through loud statements, but with controlled gestures that spoke volumes. At Charles and Camilla's 2005 wedding, Anne was stoic, distant, and visibly unimpressed. Her face said what? Her voice never did. She stood apart, emotionally and physically, signaling to the world that Camilla's place in the royal fold had not been earned, only permitted. Even after the ceremony, Anne's actions reinforced her private disdain. She refused to curtsy to Camilla, citing royal protocol. According to palace tradition, princesses born into the royal family outrank those who marry into it. Anne didn't invent this rule, she upheld it with surgical precision. It wasn't personal, she insisted, it was principle. But those who watched her closely knew better. Their interactions at public events were cold but civil, almost rehearsed in their distance. There were no lingering conversations, no shared laughter. They were cordial, said one palace staffer, but the tension was always there. You could feel it in the air. Behind closed doors, Anne never softened. Her loyalty remained firmly with her mother and the institution, not the woman who married her brother. Over time, her resistance became iconic, a symbol of quiet protest wrapped in royal decorum. Anne didn't need to launch attacks. Her silence was her weapon. Her refusal to bow wasn't just a snub, it was a message. And as Camilla's title began shifting without formal approval, Anne's quiet opposition hardened into something immovable. But Anne wasn't resisting out of bitterness. She was standing on royal ground. Because behind that cold composure was a reason rooted in law, legacy, and a very specific instruction from Queen Elizabeth herself. The title of Queen wasn't just a word. It was a responsibility, a rank, and in this case, a limit that had already been defined. And when Camilla crossed that line, Anne knew she had to draw it again. The power of titles. Why Queen Consort matters. In the monarchy, titles aren't just ceremonial, they're constitutional. Every word carries centuries of tradition, and every rank reflects the line between privilege and power. That's why the title Queen Consort was so important to Queen Elizabeth II. It honored Camilla's position without rewriting history, without competing with Diana, without unsettling the public trust. Camilla's title was made very clear before the Queen passed. In a public statement, Elizabeth said it was her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. It was an olive branch to Camilla, but also a boundary, one designed to protect the legacy of Diana and maintain the image of a modern, accountable monarchy. But something changed. After Elizabeth's death, the word consort slowly disappeared. Royal documents, press releases, and official event listings began referring to Camilla simply as the Queen. There was no formal announcement, no media briefing, just a quiet rebranding. And to Princess Anne, that wasn't a slip. It was a coup. The Queen never intended her to carry the full title, said one royal source close to Anne. It was a matter of public trust. and Camilla is rewriting it behind the scenes. For Anne, this was no longer just about personal history. It was about respect for the people, for the late monarch, and for the invisible rules that hold the crown together. When Camilla stepped beyond that line, she wasn't just claiming a title. She was rewriting royal law with silence. And it was that silence that made it all the more dangerous. Because when royal tradition is undermined without public consent, it creates confusion, then conflict. The moment Queen Consort became just Queen, a quiet line was crossed inside Buckingham Palace. And the reaction wasn't just from Anne. The palace itself began to shift. Events were rearranged, schedules were adjusted, and a quiet freeze began forming around the woman once welcomed cautiously into the fold. The palace reacts. In the days and weeks after Anne's banquet confrontation, royal insiders noticed subtle but telling changes. Camilla's name began to disappear from certain invitations. Her solo engagements were reduced. Public appearances with Charles continued, but the warmth was gone. "It felt staged," said one former staffer, "like something had cracked underneath." Palace aides, who once balanced their loyalties between Charles and Camilla, quietly realigned. More began reporting directly to Charles, or to William and Kate. Camilla's closest advisors, those responsible for shaping her image and appearances, were gradually moved to less prominent roles. Some were let go entirely. It was a restructuring without an announcement, one aide explained. No memos, just movement. The press noticed too. Headlines stopped calling her the Queen so boldly. Commentators began using Queen Camilla with increasing caution. Behind that shift was a quiet message from the palace press office, a subtle reintroduction of the original term, Queen Consort. The institution was correcting course, not publicly, but internally, and those watching closely knew why. Meanwhile, Charles remained uncharacteristically quiet. He did not defend Camilla. He didn't deny Anne's words. He simply carried on. But that silence spoke volumes. It signaled that Charles was no longer shielding his wife from the consequences of a narrative she may have tried to rewrite. And in the monarchy, silence is rarely passive. It's permission. Charles at a crossroads. King Charles has always been defined by patience. He waited longer than any heir in British history to wear the crown. And when he finally did, he hoped to reign with balance between modernity and tradition, duty and affection. But Camilla's shifting title forced a question he never wanted to face. Should he protect his wife or preserve his mother's legacy? He loved Camilla. No one doubts that. He waited decades for her, endured scandals, headlines, and even public rejection to keep her by his side. She is the woman who makes him feel human, one biographer once said. But Queen Elizabeth's final wish was clear. Camilla should never be called queen, and honoring that meant questioning everything he had fought for. At first, Charles avoided conflict. He allowed Queen Consort to fade in favor of Queen, but never issued a statement. He hoped time would dull the resistance. But Anne's outburst and the subtle revolt from inside the palace left him with no room to hide. The decision wasn't theoretical anymore. It was right in front of him, etched into the silence of his own family. And so, Charles found himself torn, not by politics, but by love. The woman who had stood beside him through scandal was now the symbol of a growing crisis, and the sister who had always protected him was now his most formidable challenger. One demanded loyalty, the other demanded truth. And Charles knew he couldn't give both. As Charles stood in silence, weighing the crown against the heart another figure stepped into focus. She didn't speak often. She didn't need to. From the start, she was the quiet force shaping the monarchy's future. The people called her the People's Princess 2.0. But inside the palace, her power was growing far beyond comparison. Kate wasn't just the Duchess of Cambridge anymore. She was becoming something else entirely. The monarchy's unshakable future. Kate versus Camilla. Catherine, Princess of Wales, didn't challenge Camilla with words. She did it with presence. From the moment she entered royal life, she drew public affection without trying. Where Camilla faced suspicion, Kate was embraced. Where Camilla was seen as part of the past, Kate became the image of the monarchy's future. This wasn't just a popularity contest. It was a quiet battle of narratives. Camilla had to claw her way back into favor, weathering headlines and rehabilitating her image, brick by brick. But Kate? She simply walked into a room and people leaned forward. "She's the natural heir to Diana's public heart," a commentator once said. And that shadow haunted Camilla. Tensions simmered behind closed doors. According to insiders, Camilla was uncomfortable with Kate's rise. Rumors even circulated that Kate's parents were once forced to use a side entrance at the palace, a pointed reminder of their outsider status. And when Kate once declined to curtsy to Camilla at a formal engagement, it wasn't just a missed protocol, it was a statement. Despite the unspoken tension, Kate never retaliated. She held firm. She showed up. She served. And every time she did, the public drew a clearer contrast. Camilla was tolerated. Kate was celebrated. In time, that shift became irreversible. Within the palace, aides began to treat Kate's presence as more than ceremonial. She was becoming central to the monarchy's future, and Camilla felt it. But it wasn't just Kate's grace or Anne's principles that cornered Camilla. It was a wound that had never healed. A grudge passed down not through bloodlines but through heartbreak. Because the one person whose approval could have changed everything never gave it. And his silence toward Camilla wasn't polite. It was pointed. Prince William didn't speak of it often, but those who knew him understood. He could never truly forgive the woman who replaced his mother. Diana's ghost. Prince William was only a boy when the fairy tale fell apart, but he saw everything. He watched his mother cry behind closed doors, heard the whispers, felt the coldness. When the marriage between Charles and Diana collapsed, it wasn't just tabloid drama. It was his childhood. And at the center of that collapse, in William's eyes, stood Camilla. Even after Diana's tragic death, the memory didn't fade. It hardened. William reportedly never fully accepted Camilla's presence. He tolerated her for his father, said one insider, but never embraced her. Their early meetings were awkward, even strained. And while Harry seemed more open to building a bridge, William remained distant, formal, respectful, but always slightly cold. That coldness never thawed. Over the years, Camilla's attempts at connection were met with guarded smiles and rehearsed politeness. And when she began rising through the ranks of public recognition, quietly dropping consort from her title, William was furious. He saw it not as a simple change in nomenclature, but as a betrayal of his mother's memory. According to close aides, William expressed concerns privately, but never publicly. Instead, he acted strategically, supporting Anne, uplifting Kate, and leaning into the image of the modern monarchy, one that honored Diana, not erased her. His message was clear. There's no place in the future crown for rewriting the past, especially not by the woman who, in his mind, started it all. The investigation nobody saw coming. In the polished halls of Buckingham Palace, scandal doesn't shout. It whispers. And those whispers reach the ears of the only man with the authority to act without saying a word, King Charles. Quietly, with no press leaks or formal orders, a private internal review was launched, not to disgrace Camilla, but to verify what had become impossible to ignore. A small, trusted circle began tracing communications, subtle inquiries, meetings with media consultants, and shifts in Camilla's press coverage. What they uncovered wasn't treason, but it was coordinated. A pattern emerged. Camilla's title was being reshaped deliberately, not through law, but through repetition. Press releases, invitations, schedules, official website edits. It was a quiet campaign to make Queen Consort disappear. Then came the turning point. A confidential note from one of Camilla's advisors suggested future branding that included Queen Camilla without the consort suffix. When confronted, the advisor claimed it was a clerical suggestion. But Charles knew better. "Where there's smoke in the monarchy," said one longtime staffer, "there's usually a well-managed fire." The final report didn't blame Camilla directly, but it made clear she was aware. That awareness crossed the line. Charles had tolerated many things in the name of peace. But this was rewriting his mother's last wish. And for that, he could not stay silent much longer. The investigation confirmed what Anne feared, what William suspected, and what the Queen had tried to prevent. Camilla's ascent had quietly overstepped its boundary. But the story didn't end with discovery. It deepened. Because while Charles wrestled with what to do next, the public had already made their choice. And the tides of loyalty were shifting fast. The people didn't just want stability, they wanted a future. And that future had a name. The public turns. In every photo, every speech, every school visit and hospital tour, the public sentiment grew louder without saying a word. William and Kate weren't just the future. They were the present. While palace intrigue simmered in the background, the people had already chosen their monarchy's new face. Kate's elegance, William's grounded presence. Their connection to the public wasn't manufactured. It was felt. And in the vacuum created by Camilla's title controversy, that connection surged. Approval ratings soared. Headlines shifted. "William and Kate light the way," read one front page. Camilla's name? Nowhere in sight. Inside the palace, their influence grew. William was consulted more frequently on matters of state. Kate began leading more solo engagements, ones previously reserved for senior royals. Invitations were redesigned. Seating arrangements changed. Slowly but clearly, the future was being recast. And Camilla? She wasn't removed. But she was no longer centered. To the public, this felt like justice. For those still mourning Diana, it was vindication. Kate wasn't just a duchess or a consort. She had become the emotional heir to the Queen herself. And the more she rose, the more Camilla seemed to fade. Without scandal, without drama, but unmistakably. But inside the palace, this shift wasn't celebrated by all. Camilla could feel her influence slipping, replaced not by rebellion, but relevance. She had once weathered storms with Charles at her side, but now even he was silent. And Anne? She wasn't done. As the palace walls closed in, Anne's quiet defiance transformed into firm resolve. And the moment came when her voice, unshakable and rooted in royal blood, delivered the monarchy's final, unspoken verdict. Anne holds the line. Princess Anne has never sought headlines. She doesn't chase approval, but when duty calls, she answers with fire. And as Camilla's image quietly unraveled, Anne stepped forward, not with rage, but with resolve. Not to destroy, but to protect. Behind closed doors, Anne confronted Charles again. This time, not in public, not at a banquet, but in private. She reminded him, calmly, firmly, that the monarchy is not just family. It is legacy. "You made a promise," she said, to her and to the people. That promise, of course, was to their mother. Queen Elizabeth's wish had not been cryptic or conditional. It was clear. Camilla could serve as queen consort, but not as queen. And Anne, as the last unshakable piece of the queen's original generation, refused to let that wish die with the woman who gave it. Others might have compromised, others might have softened, but not Anne. She had endured every scandal, survived every shift in public opinion. She had remained loyal to the monarchy even as others sought comfort. And now she would be its shield, not for power, for preservation. Her presence at family events became more prominent. Her silence more commanding. One staffer put it best. Anne doesn't speak much, but when she does, everyone listens. Because when she moves, the monarchy moves with her. With Anne standing like a pillar of the old monarchy, and Kate rising as the crown's future, Camilla was caught in the middle of a story that was never truly hers. And as the royal family shifted around her, the question became impossible to avoid. What happens next? Because the final chapter of this unfolding drama won't be written by Charles. It will be written by the one person whose time is fast approaching: William. What happens next? The monarchy now sits on a quiet fault line. Publicly, it's united. But privately, everyone knows the truth. There is a divide, and Camilla stands on the wrong side of it. No official statement has been made. No titles have been revoked. But her role, her future, her very place beside the throne is uncertain. Charles, weary and torn, continues to fulfill his duties, but no longer pushes Camilla into the spotlight. Insiders say decisions involving her are now reviewed more cautiously. Some speculate that when William ascends, changes will be made swiftly and without sentiment. "He's been waiting a long time," said one source, "and he won't let this cloud hang over his reign." For now, Camilla still holds the title, but the warmth is gone. The public has chosen William and Kate. The palace has chosen Anne as its moral compass, and the Queen's ghost, her words, her wishes, echo louder than ever. Camilla may have worn the crown, but it never truly belonged to her. What happens next isn't a scandal. It's a succession. A silent correction, of course. A family rebalancing itself before the world's eyes. No speeches, no declarations, just legacy being quietly restored by the very people sworn to protect it. Because in the end, the monarchy is not defined by power, but by memory. And the crown remembers. For decades, the royal family kept one secret buried deep behind palace walls. But now, Princess Anne has spoken, and everything is unraveling. In a shocking moment at a royal banquet, Anne publicly reminded Camilla she was never meant to be queen, only queen consort, just as their mother, Queen Elizabeth, had intended. The room fell silent. King Charles stood frozen. Was this a personal attack or a promise kept? As old wounds resurface and royal loyalties fracture, one truth can no longer be denied. The crown's future hangs in the balance. And Anne has made it clear. It's time to confess.